Hi, good afternoon. Let me just tell you a little about myself since maybe you've not seen me before. So I am actually, I studied in Yeshiva Flatbush, but I made Aliyah. I just came back from Israel. I was there for 20 years, and I'm back in Brooklyn. So I teach, I give Shiurei Torah. I'm the rabbi in Manhattan Beach. I'm also a lawyer, so I deal with that type of stuff as well. Technology law, come from Israel, a world of high tech, so that's what I do. And it's really nice to be here. Nice to meet new faces, to see new people. I love meeting new people, so it's great. I don't know any of you, so that's already a good sign. Gee, it was so long ago, I don't remember. I think it was 82 or 83 maybe. So it was a long time ago. But one of the things I like to do in my classes, some of the classes, and I'm going to do that here, is I like to think about concepts in the Western world and take the Jewish Torah approach to those same concepts. Because, we live in the Western world, right? And we're consumed by the world around us, not just physically, but also intellectually, right? So oftentimes, it's good to think about these concepts and understand, wait, hold on. Are we being consumed by something that doesn't necessarily align itself with Torah thinking? So it's a great exercise, and I like to do that here. So you all heard of Plato, the great Athenian philosopher, and he wrote a book called The Republic. At least that's the most famous of his writings. And The Republic is considered one of the most influential books in especially in political philosophy. And there's a chapter there. I have to tell you, when I was in college, I didn't like philosophy a lot. I didn't. I found it to be uninteresting. But I think this particular section will be interesting. He talks about a cave, okay? So there's this cave. It's dark. You can't see anything. Chained to the wall of the cave are people. These people never saw the world outside the cave. They were born there, they grew up there, chained to the walls, and they never escaped. They're in this dark existence. And they see shadows on the walls of the cave because sometimes people are walking outside, there's movement, and there's light. In the allegory he brings, there's a fireplace somewhere, and there's these shadows that they see. Now from their perspective, these shadows are reality. That's the world. What happens? One of the people, he begins to think about, is there something to explore outside of this existence? So he frees himself from the shackles, he breaks away, and he begins to explore the cave, and eventually he reaches the outside world. And for the first time, he sees sunlight. And then he begins to explore, and he sees that because of the sunlight, he's becoming aware of an entire world. Trees, animals, mountains. And he understands that the shadows that they saw when they were in the cave are not real. Right? The world outside the cave, that's real. And he's all excited. And one day, he decides to return to the cave. And he wants to tell his friends, guys, there's a world out there. Come join me. It's kind of odd. And I think when I tell you what happens, you'll say, why? But this is actually what happens in the story, right? In the story, he returns to the cave and he tells them, guys, there's a world out there, come join me. And he's trying to convince them that there is indeed a world out there, and he wants to free them. And as things turn, there's an argument, and the argument becomes heated. And finally they tell him, leave us alone. Leave us alone. We're not interested in what you have to say. And they threaten to kill him. So it's either he gets killed or he runs away. And he runs away, and he joins the real world. That's the story. Now, Plato takes a bunch of lessons from here. One of the lessons is that when you're in the dark, you can never imagine the light. To be able to imagine the light, you have to have experienced light. So a person in complete darkness has to leave the darkness, experience light, and then he can understand something. That's the first lesson. A person in darkness cannot, in his mind, fathom the light. And the second lesson is that you can have a brilliant person, you can have brilliant individuals. There are people who can escape the shadow, who can escape the darkness, but these people are few and far between. Most people prefer to live in darkness. That's it. That's the story right there. And the question I want to ask you is, how does the Torah view this matter? Because the Torah has a very particular point of view on this matter. And it's as follows. It's in the story of the Exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt. And let me tell you how the story of the Exodus bears directly upon Plato's problem. So first of all, the problem I agree with. It's a real problem. People do live in darkness. People are chained to primitive ideas. That we agree with Plato. But the resolution of the problem is different in the Torah than it was in Plato's Republic. And I want to deal with you. The purpose of this class is to deal with you, to deal with the resolution of the problem. Okay, let's look at Egypt. Egypt in the Torah is called Bet Avadim. The Pasuk says in the first of the Ten Commandments, Anochi Adonai Elohecha Asher Hosaticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim mi Bet. What is Egypt? Bet Avadim. It's not called a Bet Avdut. It's not called a Bet Avdut, a place where there is slavery. It is called a place of slaves. It's a place of slaves. It's not just slavery. There's slavery, there's slavery today in some countries in the world, unfortunately. There's slavery there. A place of slaves implies that Egypt was composed of a society of slaves. And we know this from the days of Yosef, when everybody sold themselves into slavery to the Pharaoh. And the society is transformed. And from this point onwards, the only person who is not a slave to someone else is Paro. Imagine a pyramid. At the zenith of the pyramid is one point. Under it, there is an expanding line of masonry. And that's Egyptian society. You have Paro. He's the only non-slave. Under him are his close advisors. Under them are further advisors, other government ministers, down, 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 down. Everybody ultimately is a slave to Paro. It is a Bet Avadim. Question. If you are a Jew, you were born in Egypt, the only world you know about is a world of slavery. Is it possible to discover that you are a slave? Think about that. You've never heard of democracy. There's no internet, there's no email, there's no WhatsApp, there's no Facebook, there's none of that. There's no mail. Nothing comes into the country. Nothing leaves the country. This is the world you were born in. This is the world your parents were born in. And that's all there is. Can you fathom a freedom? Plato's answer will be, well, you were born in the cave. You were born in darkness. You will never understand what freedom is because you never experienced freedom. You've never experienced the light. And I said that this class will deal with 3 secret miracles. Did I say that? I think I did. And here's the first miracle. Mind you, this is before Moses comes to the Jewish people. Okay, just get the timing because that's really important. Look what happens. The Jewish people begin to feel tormented from the work. Vayiz'aku, and they begin to scream out to God. And look what the pasuk says. It says, "Vatal shavatam ela Elohim mina avodah," and the prayer came to God because of the work. Interesting. It repeats the word again. They were screaming because of the work. Hashem accepts their prayer because of the work. What's the issue for the Jewish people? It's not the physical affliction. You could have said, well, it's the physical affliction. It's not the deprivation. It could have been the deprivation. Inuyim, that we know all that took place. It did, right? What's the issue? The issue for the Jews is avodah. What does avodah mean? Work. We are slaves. And what does Hashem hear? Mean ha'avodah. He hears, yes, you are slaves. There is a recognition here. This is a miracle. For me, this is the first miracle. The first miracle is that here you have people who were born in darkness and they conceive of a dramatically new idea. And the new idea is freedom. Freedom, yes. That's the miracle. And when the Jews conceive of this new idea, they're still in the cave. So think of the individual who escaped Plato's cave. After he escapes, he discovers the light. The Jews are in the cave, and they begin to saying, there is light. We want to find the light. They pray to Hashem. Hashem, we want light. And Hashem understands it because Hashem knows what light is. He created the light. He created freedom. He created man in B'Tselem Elohim. So he gets it. So he understands what they're praying for. And now I want to take you to the second miracle. At the end we will tie it all together because there's a series of 3 miracles that are interrelated. Okay? So at first you're going to say, well, the second miracle doesn't really. How's that related to the first? It is. Okay. The second miracle has actually 2 parts. I'm going to read to you the pasuk that has to do with part B, and then afterwards I will go to part A. I'm switching the order intentionally, okay? Here's the pasuk. The Jews are now in the desert. They've achieved freedom. They're free. They still haven't received the Torah. They're in the desert. Yitro comes to visit Moshe Rabbeinu. There's a big party, celebration in honor of Yitro. The next morning, the Jewish people, the pasuk says, "Vahi mimachorat," the next day, "Vayeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am." Moses is there, judging the people. Mina boker ad ha'arev. Okay. What happens? The people, like in any society, imagine you have here a society of 2 million people. You have a society of 2 million people, there's going to be disputes between the people, right? That's what happens. How do you resolve disputes between people? You're in the Wild West. I mean, take America, a country that I love, and I think all of you love America, but let's just go to the Wild West nevertheless. So if you're in the Wild West, how do you resolve disputes between people? Shootouts, violence. You know, it's always going to be violence. The only alternative to violence is law. And the Jewish people, they're in the desert. There is no law. There is no government. There are no police officers. Right? There's no political establishment. There's one leader. His name is Moses. He's a very humble man, and he is not physically capable. No individual is physically capable of enforcing a law. There is no law, by the way, either. Right? There is no law either. So there's no law. There's no way to enforce a law, even if there was a law. And yet, what do the people do? They come up with a brilliant idea. And they say, we are a nation now. We are in the desert. We escaped the Egyptians. We want to be ruled by law because the alternative to law is violence. And in a world of violence, that's survival of the fittest. Herbert Spencer, really dark world which justifies just terrible things. I mean, just terrible things. So the Jews, they not only escape the cave, they not only enter the light, but they make a decision. They come to Moses and they say, Moses, we want to be ruled by law. I said there was 2 parts to this. And the first part is as follows. The miracles in Egypt, they're called otot. that has a particular meaning. We're not going to deal with that now. They're called mofetim. That has a particular meaning. We're not going to deal with that now. There's also another word for miracles in the text describing Yetziat Mitzrayim. So nisim is not one of them. What other word do we use to describe miracles? The answer is shofetim. What does the word shofetim mean? Judgments. So what is the relationship between the word shofetim, judgments, and the miracles? And the answer is as follows. We look at the world, and you can say, gee, that was really bad luck. The Egyptians, man, they had some bad luck. This locust, never seen locusts like that before. That was bad. There was there was this terrible, virus, whatever. So you say, really, it was just terrible luck. I mean, look, they really got slammed, right? So that's one way of looking at the world. So you can look at history as a chain of unrelated coincidences, and sometimes the coincidences inure to your favor. Sometimes they don't inure to your favor. They damage you. So here the Egyptians had a really bad year, and that's the way the Goyim look at the world. They look at the world in terms of fate, right? There's kind of a fate. The Jews came up with the brilliant notion, shofetim, judgments. What does that mean? For there to be judgments, there has to be a judge. There has to be a God who created the world, who was looking at the world and say, wait, this is not good and that's not good. Let me readjust things a little. Their view of history was a view of history. The premise of that view is that there is a creator who is judging the world. And what happened to the Egyptians? Well, we're the Jews. We know what happened to the Egyptians. They were really nasty. They brutalized us unfairly. They mistreated us. They took the children, they threw them in the the male children, they threw them in the Yaor. They were unfair to us. They made unreasonable requests. They said, and the Jews understood this, and they say, you know what? There's a judge to the world. It's not that the Egyptians had bad luck, and it's not that the stars said that the Egyptians are going to have bad luck. Actually, the Harambam I get it, Tashmad. He actually says that the stars in those days, the Egyptians believed in astrology, and the stars were like aligned perfectly in favor of the Egyptians. It was like awesome to be an Egyptian back then, according to the stars, not according to the real world. So when the Jews looked at what happened to the Egyptians, they said, this is shofetim. There was a judge to the world, and it's exactly the way it should happen. Now, if there's a judge to the world, then what do you want? You want to be subject to his law. So these same people who understand this shofetim, they say we want to be ruled not by violence, but by law. You see the relationship between viewing the miracles as shofetim on the one side and saying, well, if there's a shofet, I want to submit myself to his law. That's the second miracle. Notice these miracles are intellectual miracles, and I think intellectual miracles are and we can argue, are they great or not greater? I got a phone call when I was giving this class. How can you say they're great? You can choose for yourself which is greater. I personally find the intellectual miracles to be greater than the physical miracles. Not that the physical miracles weren't great. They were amazing, no doubt. But I think that the Jewish mind was able to see the light in the darkness, that the Jewish mind understood, wait, we're going to get freedom now. What do we do with our freedom? Do we become a bunch of brutes like the Egyptians were brutes to us? Do we now become a bunch of brutes to each other? That's a second miracle. No, we want to be ruled by law. I love that. That's just great. And finally, the third miracle. And the third miracle has to do with the concept of berit. Berit. What does berit mean? Berit means covenant. That means there is a commitment. So here's the thing. We have a law. We have a legal system. Great idea. The law is only effective if it's an eternal law. I'll explain why. If you have Torah mehashamayim, the law is effective. It's eternal. It can't be changed. If you don't have Torah mehashamayim, then the law can be changed. It's not from God. It can be changed. Who changes the law? Politicians, legislators, parliaments. What happens when the law is changed by man? The law becomes a tool in the hands of the ruling class to manipulate the people. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really done in a bad way. Note many of the communist countries or socialist countries where the ruling class, they were incredibly wealthy, and the regular people lived in poverty because the law was used to manipulate the people. So on the one hand, the Jews are there in the desert. Just think of it. They're brilliant minds. I really believe that. I really believe that. They're brilliant minds, and they're thinking about this. Okay, we left the darkness, we entered the light. We believe in law, we don't believe in violence. And they begin to think, wait, but what is law? So there's two alternatives. You can have Torah me'ashamayim, a law that treats everyone equal. It treats the citizens equally with the ruling class. The ruling class cannot manipulate the law or change the law. Or we can have a law that is a function of whatever a particular government says at a particular point in time. And that law can be changed, and you can use it to manipulate people. And the third miracle is that the Jews tell Hashem, we want to enter into a berit. What does a berit mean? We are eternally bound to the law of God. On the one hand, there's two parts of the berit. There's Torah me'ashamayim. God has a law. That's called the Torah. Second part of the berit, the Jews, we want to commit ourselves to this law, because if we don't commit ourselves to that law, we will be enslaved by another legal system, right? So we switched the Pharaoh for a Jewish Pharaoh. So what's the solution to that? Berit. That's the three miracles. And, right. Yes, please.
But not all the Jews bought into the Greek.
Into the
20% left Egypt.
Right.
So
It's true, by the way. And there was also, and among those who left, there was also a lot of Erev Rav. Of course. I agree. We had brilliant minds, and unfortunately, we had people who were opportunistic, and they wanted to leave. They saw the Jews are doing great. Let's join them. I agree. I absolutely agree. But we also had brilliant minds, and this is really brilliant. By the way, I consider this to be, many of these ideas are kind of, in a sense, seeds for later on the founding fathers of this country, because many of the ideas in the U.S. Constitution, for those of you who may have studied constitutional law or studied the Constitution or the history of the Constitution, you'll see a lot of those offshoots are actually offshoots that come from this, right, from these concepts. So the founding fathers wanted the U.S. to be based on a constitution. The constitution would not be subject to the whims of any particular political party or political leader, and that's why it's so hard to change the Constitution. So there is a lot of that in the U.S. system. I want to get to the following point, and it's so important. But first, I will take your question.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time with the first question and saying that the Jews, just to fathom the ability of being free and comparing it to Plato's cave. I'm thinking of slavery in America with black slaves. They also were able to conceive a reality in which they were free. It wasn't
Right.
unfathomable. So, I just don't know if we can make that comparison of the ability to see darkness despite the ability to see
Right.
light. Despite
Right, except that in America, there were free people, right? There were free people, right? Not everybody were slaves. Most people were free. Most people were able to choose their vocation, choose their education, choose what they do with their time and how they make a living. When the blacks were enslaved in America, right, they were fully aware of the free people around them, and they wanted to, and they aspired to be free like the people around them. The point in Egypt, I'll give you a great example. Look at North Korea today. North Koreans are convinced that the North Korean dictator is one of the most enlightened people in the world. Now, that conclusion is because everybody in North Korea believes that the North Korean dictator is one of the most enlightened people in the world. And all information that enters North Korea will be perfectly aligned with the idea that he's one of the most enlightened people in the world. So when you're constantly bombarded with this idea, and that's all you see, and you see nothing else, oh, that's a little different. So we're not talking here about a pluralistic society, a society where they had different types of thinking. We're talking here about a totalitarian regime. And that's why Misraim is not just called a Bet Avadim. Bet Avadim means a house where they're slaves, they're all slaves, right? How can you call Egypt a house of slaves? Aren't you insulting yourself? What does it mean, a house of slaves? Because they were all slaves to the Pharaoh. But it's also called Kur HaBarzel. Kur HaBarzel means it was like an iron dome where nobody could escape. So there was nothing, nobody was able to leave Egypt and say, guys, I found a new world. Here's the way we should do it. So to be a slave to the Pharaoh is a great honor. To be a slave, that's just the way the system works. See, so you talk to a Russian waiting online in bread lines in the 70s. They used to have bread lines and shoe lines and toilet paper lines and everything else. And they would tell you sincerely, it's not until information began to flow into Russia that they changed their mind. But until that point in time, they would sincerely believe that Russia is the greatest country in the world to live in. That's just human nature, because human beings are affected by what they're surrounded. So if you're consumed by this world, that's all you know. Okay? Yes.
Wasn't it the women who defied Paro, who saw themselves as not necessarily slaves of Paro, that you could fight back to some degree, like if you say, what's her name, Shifra,
Yes.
Miriam and Yocheved, or even Miriam and Yocheved, their own actions.
Right.
They defied Paro.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I agree with that, and I actually think that women have I think about us so that the women have a bina yetera. They have a stronger intuitive sense than men. Men are a little more like, okay. And women, they have a certain intelligence that comes from within. And there's a lot to say about that, meaning what you're raising is how exactly the Jews conceive of the idea of freedom. And that's a great question. I didn't even answer that question. I'm not going to answer it now. But I agree with you that the woman had a lot to do with that. So they had a certain intuitive power to them, and they sensed that something, no, this is not right. No, this is not right. They got it, absolutely. Okay, so here's something I want to bring to your attention. The idea of us being the chosen people, okay? We're the chosen people. Don't we say every day, Asher b'chalbanu mikol amim, God chose us from among the nations. What does that mean, that we're the chosen people? People say that's a really arrogant, kind of arrogant thing to say.
We chose.
Well, we chose. First of all, absolutely. We chose to recognize darkness for what it is. We chose to go out and find the light. And when we did that, Hashem sent us Moses. It's after we did that Hashem sent us Moses. We chose to be ruled by law. We chose to commit ourselves to this law so that the law can't be used to manipulate future generations. We chose all of that. Let's go now to the Gentile world. There's a great book. I love this book. You can decide to agree or disagree. Escape from Freedom. Eric Fromm, published 1941. This is before the U.S. Got involved in World War II. What does Eric Fromm do in his book? He begins to analyze what is it that allows people to become subjects of totalitarian regimes. He especially, obviously, because it was the days of the the Nazis, so he goes a lot into that. Why would a person allow himself to be the subject of a totalitarian regime? And he says something really brilliant, and he says, as European society developed in the 19th century, and there was more and more freedoms given because the caste system was was already gone, and now there was idea of individual rights and the emancipation of the Jews, and this was just a movement in Europe during the 19th century, and people became free. And when you become free, you become an individual, and when you become an individual, you have to make choices. And sometimes, when you make those choices, you're alone in those choices. And that takes courage. Not everyone has the courage to be alone with those choices. It takes courage. It takes responsibility. And you know what's a really easy thing to do? To submit yourself to a leader, and this leader will tell you what's right, what's wrong, what you should do, what you should think. And do you know what the original title to Escape from Freedom was? Fear of Freedom. Think about that title for a minute. People are afraid of freedom. Oh no, they say, I know in America, well, we all believe we're free and free and free. I got it, I understand that. But with the freedom comes responsibility. And one of the reasons, in my humble opinion, and by the way, I don't talk about politics in my class, don't worry, I won't talk about politics. You believe in Democrats, you believe in Republicans, you believe in independent, that's your business, not mine. I'm a rabbi, I'm here to teach Torah, so please don't try to read into what I'm saying as endorsing a particular candidate or particular, it's not my business. So one of the reasons that you see that people are really becoming divided along political lines. It used to be that if you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, or vice versa, you know, we'd be okay, you know, like, oh, what do you think? Oh, you voted for whatever. Yeah, I voted for, you voted for Reagan, I voted for Carter. You know, we'd be able to have a dialogue. You know, we wouldn't be like, here it's like it's ending up in really heated debates. I mean, people are getting angry. Do you understand that as people become more and more free and they break away from the values of the Jewish Bible, Old Testament, they call it Old Testament, I'd rather call it the Jewish Bible for whatever reason, not to get into this class. As we break away from those values, we become more empty and more alone with our choices because we have such freedoms, and with that freedom comes fear, and with the fear comes the need for a political leader that we believe in, that will be the substitute for that, right? So what Eric Fromm says in his book, Escape from Freedom, originally Fear from Freedom, is people are afraid of freedom. People need a political leader above them to tell them what to do and what to believe. Back to the Jews in Egypt. Why are we the chosen people? We're the chosen people because we had the courage to escape the comfort of the cave. When you're in that cave and that's all you know about, that's great. That's the world. I can deal with these shadows. You got to go outside. There's sunlight. There's a real world. I have to build a house. I have to work. I have to plant food so that I can eat food. That's scary. But we, the Jewish people, we are the chosen people because we made ourselves the chosen people. We chose to be free. We chose to escape the cave. We chose to say we don't want to be ruled by a political leader who will be on top of us. We don't want to be a totalitarian regime. When the Jews enter Israel, where's the king? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. Why do you think we don't have a king? Why can't we appoint a king? Hundreds of years later, the Jews come to God and say, we want a king. Hashem is like, I don't want to give you a king. Why not? Give him a king. Oh, he says, okay, you want it really badly? You know what? You're going to get a king, and here's what's going to happen. He's going to subject you. He's going to subject your children. You've been warned. This is what happens to people who can't deal with freedom. They become slaves. Again, you were slaves in Egypt. You escaped. Now you want to do that again? That's the idea of escape from freedom, but that's the idea of being the chosen people. So I'm going to summarize. I'll take your question in a moment. I just want to summarize, and we're almost done. So thank you for bearing with me. These are the three miracles. They're all related. We had the courage. We said, you know what? There's judgments in the world. There's a direction in history. There's a creator. We want to be on his side. We don't want to be subjected to political leaders. We don't want to be slaves anymore. You asked before about the Egyptians. They were slaves. So how did we? Because the Egyptians wanted to be slaves. That's the point of Eric Fromm. People want a political leader above them. America is a great country in that regard, because America is actually, the whole idea of America, freedom and the rights of man, is premised upon this very story that I'm telling you today. And I hope America stays in that way. Again, we had this conversation about how people are becoming very fragmented along, political lines. That's a very bad sign. I hope it kind of reverses, and I pray that it reverses and that we have good leadership in this country. Nevertheless, what the Jews did is they made that choice. And that's the beracha, Asher b'char banu mikol ha'amim. Hashem chose us because we chose him. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yes?
Jews get the Torah just days after they cross the Dead Sea.
Yep.
They still have that slave mentality.
Right.
They're looking for leadership. They're looking for laws.
Yep.
Somebody can interpret and say, well, they're accepting the Torah with that slave mentality.
Except for one thing. With all totalitarian regimes, it's always another person from the political class who's telling you what to think and what to do and how you should do it. In this case, we believed in shofetim. Shofetim means we believed in a divine creator, and we said we want to be ruled by him. Because when you're ruled by people, they can manipulate the law, they can change the law, they can change your mind, their interests can change. One day I'm supported by an oil company, going to make laws in favor of the oil company. Another day I'm supported by another company, I'll make laws in favor of them, whatever it is. So it's different to be a slave to God, to be aligned with God's laws, is not the same as to be a slave to a totalitarian despot. Right? Case in point, North Korea. When North Korean dictator died, I think it was 5-6 years ago, the father, no, they were all crying in the streets. I mean, they were hysterically, they were sobbing. I mean, you saw tears, globs of tears coming out of their eyes. They were sincerely sad. When Stalin died, I mean, look what happened in Russia. The man killed, by all estimates, I mean, tens of millions of Russians. I mean, that's not a secret. That's fact. They were in the street crying. They were sobbing hysterically. Our light is gone, the Russian version of his death. So we see what happens when you become enamored and when you turn a person into an idol, right? You become a slave, not just physically, but intellectually and spiritually, and that's it. The light is gone. The image of God, it goes with that. Any other questions? Yes?
What are your thoughts on, at the end of, I forget which parasha, when Yosef, at the end, when family comes down to Egypt, and the nation of Egypt no longer has any money to give,
Right.
and that starts slavery?
Right.
I'm just wondering, how can that not be in the national consciousness or part of our identity?
Yeah.
It was Joseph himself who, I don't know if he started it, but
Right.
it seems to show that he started slavery.
Right. First of all, that's in Parashat Vayigash, and I would agree with you that Yosef was instrumental. He was instrumental in bringing about the state where everybody was slaves to the Pharaoh. Now, we can criticize him for that. We can say, well, was that the wise thing to do? Or, and unfortunately this happens, sometimes you have a crisis, and the solution to the crisis requires you to do something that may have certain negative consequences. So in this case, Yosef is looking at this crisis. The people are going to starve to death. Egypt is going to go down as a country. The economy will crash. And there was no good solution. That's it. By the way, in life, it's really important to understand that. Sometimes in life, there is no good solution. I'm in Israel. I don't like any of the political parties. Okay, so who am I going to vote for? I'm not going to vote. I mean, just choose the best one. Okay, so Shlomo HaMelech is not there, and Maimonides is not there running for prime minister of Israel, so I'm not going to vote. Or I can say, well, it's not a great, not great choices I have. I have to choose the best. Harambam says, Behar bara b'miuto. When you have in life choices, choose the least worst choice. I love that thing. Behar bara b'miuto, right? So here, Yosef is there. The economy is going to get destroyed, decimated. What do? He came up with a brilliant solution. By the way, it saved Egypt. He saved millions of people. Millions of people saved. But the consequences are what they are. I agree. Yes?
I just want to follow up on what she said. The fact is that the Jews weren't always slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So although they were slaves at the moment that the plagues came,
Yep.
they were still great-grandparents who somebody remembered.
Right.
Remembered when they came down and they were enslaved.
And there you go to the next class, which is the woman. It was the woman who still believed in the concept of family and the sacredness of family. And I'm not going to talk about that now, but I'll just like touch upon it. One of the classes I love giving is about the role of family in Judaism. And the family has always been the bulwark against despotic regimes. By the way, why do you think in communism it's so important to undo the family? Because the only independent source of reality that a person can have is from his parents. When you undo the family and you delegitimize the family, now you become the only source of truth. This is done all the time. It was done in Nazi Germany, by the way.
So why they did that on kibbutz?
Oh, why they do? Terrible.
But they did that on kibbutz?
Terrible choice. Terrible choice. I think you would agree with me. That they, on the kibbutzim.
That's what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Reprehensible. It was a mistake, and they shouldn't have done that. And I think some of them, I believe some of them know that they made a mistake in doing that. They were trying to follow the communist system, and they got a little carried away. Let's leave it at that without being overly critical of people who may not be in this world anymore. Last question, please.
Okay, so you say that Shofetim is another word for the miracle.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't remember, was it Shmuel who wrote the Sefer Shoftim? Because whoever did aimed it with tongue in cheek. Because there were no leaders. That's where the problem was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, you could really laugh when you read it.
Right.
Because there were no leaders.
Right, so I give now a book on the book of Shemuel. You can find it on YouTube. For those of you looking for my YouTube channel, I'll get it's you put in the it's Lucena Rabbi, Lucena, Lucena, city in Spain where the yeshiva where Rabbi Yitzhak Alfasi, the teacher at Harambam, taught. So Lucena Rabbi, and I have there a series of classes on Shemuel where I discuss some of that. What was that about Shofetim, and then Shemuel, and the transition period from Shofetim to Shemuel. Fascinating period in Jewish history. What happened? Why were the leaders ineffective then? Great question. There were leaders, but they were highly ineffective. What happened in the days of Shemuel that suddenly the leader became effective? What was the difference between him and them? So I discuss all that, and it's actually a series of classes that delves into that direction. So, if you, Lucena Rabbi. All right. I'll take another question. You've been waiting patiently, and I.
Example of freedom.
Yeah.
When it was said when you choose the judge who don't accept bribe.
Yes.
So then they are really free to make a right.
Absolutely. Lo tachuru mipnei ish, kamishpat le'Elohim hu.
They are under the bribe.
Yes.
They really
Absolutely. And we're bribed by all types of things, not just money, by interests and friends and things. Okay. Thank you so much. It was really nice to